Hey there, this is David Israelson with Bedrock Realty, and I wanted to talk to you today about picking a lot within the Austin and surrounding areas to build upon. This is something that we're going to be really helpful with during this process. This is kind of our bread and butter, and there are a lot of criteria that go into it. So I wanted to just go ahead and get started. The first thing that is number one is your budget. That is pretty much always the number one criteria, right? Your budget for the size of the lot, for the area, for the location. There are a lot of other factors that go into how much a lot or buildable lot is going to cost. But generally, picking out and figuring out what your budget is for this project is going to be key. Right? What portion of your build cost is going to be just the land itself? So I guess the most crucial thing that goes into affecting that budget is the location, the area that you're going to pick. People that we deal with on a regular basis are looking to build within the city of Austin, and that is called infill building. That is what that is called. When we're going outside of the city of Austin onto large pieces of land, large acreage, that is a different story altogether. There are a lot of different things that you can take into account. For example, if you're going out to, I don't know, Dripping Springs or Driftwood, you can find large pieces of land that are over 5 acres, usually without restrictions, which means you can really build whatever you want. And sometimes you are able to get agricultural exemptions on those pieces of land. For example, I have a very good friend of mine whose dad has had cattle on his 10-acre piece of land in Dripping Springs forever, and he pays very, very little taxes, which is very nice. So area is very, very crucial. There are lots of buildable land within the city of Austin, and sometimes those are disguised as teardowns. So that kind of brings me to another subject, is that it's not going to be normally, at least within the city of Austin or in Westlake or Driftwood or Rollingwood, it's not going to be probably a cleared lot. It's usually going to have a teardown home upon it. And really figuring out and having a search that is looking for those types of homes is something that my group does pretty well, and I'll be able to teach you in subsequent videos about how we find those pieces of land. The third thing that you need to take into account is the size and shape of the land, right? So typically, at least in the city of Austin, there is a pretty back of the napkin calculation that says that, like, for a 10,000 square foot lot, right, you can build 40% of air conditioned space upon that, right? So for example, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can build 4,000 square feet of air conditioned space. That's usually the limit. It depends on the size of the lot. Sometimes there's very, very tiny lots where you can build a lot more per for as far as percentage of the lot. But generally that's kind of our rule, 40%. The shape of that property is also important. So for example, this lot that we own, which is in Brentwood, actually Baja Brentwood, which is South Brentwood, I can get into that some other time. It is 50 feet by 200 feet. So it's a very long, skinny lot. And when we went to build a home upon this, my wife specifically did not want to get a hallway of a house. And so we had to work with the architect really, really closely to make sure that that's what we weren't doing. We wanted more of a square of a house, right? So things like that. These are things that you have to take into account. The topography. This is our another subject of the land is also really important. If it slopes a lot, if there is a cliff in the back, it might get really expensive to move a lot of this dirt around. or very expensive in order to engineer a house that's not going to fall off said cliff. So these are important factors that you should know about. Some of the topography is going to factor into also flood zones. In the city of Austin and the surrounding areas, we have a lot of flood zones. Generally, it's probably unwise to build within a flood zone, but I'm seeing it more and more. You can get a piece of land in a flood zone relatively cheaply, and so compared to other lots of similar size within the city, and people are getting pretty creative and working with the city in order to build within those flood zones. They're putting these homes a little higher, using piers, large concrete piers, to set the house a little higher. A street away over on Joe Sayers, there's a few brand new builds that I witnessed, where they are doing piers that go all the way to bedrock, and then sitting the house pretty high, and then they're having a concrete slab on top of those piers. It's generally a little more expensive in order to manufacture a slab like that, but it gets you out of the flood zone and allows you to build. One thing that a lot of people don't understand, we can talk about swimming pools. Swimming pools actually you can build in a flood zone. There is no restriction to building a swimming pool in a flood zone. And what's interesting is that we can get into impervious cover, and this is a subject for later, but swimming pools don't count towards your impervious cover either, which is very strange because they are a big concrete tub. So soil conditions are the next subject, right? So for example, in the west side of Austin, we're in a more hilly area. You're generally going to be on rock. It's going to be relatively easier and structurally more sound to build on that rocky soil than it is if we go to East Austin, where you have about 20 feet of clay. That clay swells and will break up a foundation like it's going out of style. So in order to manufacture a home and to make it structurally sound, you're going to have to do a good amount of engineering, a good amount of dirt removal, probably some pretty amazing piers. But these are all factors into the cost of the overall build of your house. The next subject are trees. So in many parts pretty anywhere in the city of Austin, in Rollingwood, in Westlake, trees are a extremely protected resource by these cities. And they will not allow you to build very close to these trees. There's things called the critical root zone, which we will go over some other time, but you are generally trying to stay away from most of the large trees, and you could generally not build next to them, right? The rule is 20 inches in diameter. So if you find a tree that is over 20 inches in diameter, you are not allowed to take that tree down, and you're really generally not allowed to build close to it. You cannot build within the critical root zone. There are exceptions to those rules. There are waivers you can get. There are ways to take the tree out, but a lot of those things are expensive, and you have to jump through a lot of hoops. And so one thing that Bedrock Realty is going to do when we are helping to find a lot or a buildable piece of land, we are going to take into account all the trees on that property and advise you on where you could put a house. The next thing that affects where you're going to be able to build on that piece of land are setbacks. Utility setbacks, city-owned setbacks. So for example, if there is a large drainage pipe that goes underneath your property and cuts the property in two, you are not going to be able to build anywhere within that setback. So know that. Also, each lot, depending on where it's located, if it's a corner lot or if it's not a corner lot, it's going to have just general setbacks, right? So for example, most of the lots, the non-corner lots, we have a 5-foot setback from these on the side of the lot, and then on the back of the lot we have a 10-foot setback, and then on the front of the lot there is a 20-foot setback. But some of those setbacks are not just city rules, but some of those are deed restrictions, right? It has to do with the zoning of the property and also deed restrictions, neighborhood rules, and each and every property is different in every part of the city. So this gets complicated, and we were going to want to do our due diligence and possibly a feasibility study with one of our architect partners before we move forward on that piece of land. The next thing to note are views and orientation of the house. So in many parts of Austin, you can get amazing views, right? You can buy a piece of land where the view is incredible. It looks over the hills or Lake Austin, and generally those are going to be pretty expensive pieces of land, but those views are worth it. And if that's what you're looking for, we will help you find it. Also, the orientation of the house. Know that there are certain cultures that when you go to sell this house are not going to buy the house if it's orientated in one way or another. Also know just where the sun is and how the sun is going to move across the sky at different times of the year, and how that is going to heat up the house or be shaded by trees. So orientation is also important. The next are existing houses, right? So a lot of people think that to tear down a house is a very expensive process. It's actually not. It's not very expensive whatsoever. It's actually relatively inexpensive, and it is a very quick process as well. And it also is a separate permit from your building permit. So you can probably demo that house or that tear down months before you are able to build upon that piece of land. But generally, it's not an expensive process to tear down a house. We did it here. There was a small stone cottage on this piece of land, which we dismantled. I actually saved all the stone and made a patio out of it. And Rachel hated it and made me take it up a long time later. So there's that. The next subject to take into account is infrastructure. So roads, right? Sometimes we're building outside of Austin. Just having roads and electricity and internet, which is very important, is sometimes hard to find. So you should always think about the infrastructure on a lot that you are wanting to build upon. Within the city of Austin, you have pretty much all the infrastructure you need. But if we go out into Westlake, you will find that there is no city sewer. So you're going to have to build a septic tank. That is going to eat up some of your budget, and it's not the greatest thing in the world to not have a city sewer. So these are things to consider. When it comes to building on a lot, it really has to do with your ultimate vision of what you want. Do you want multiple houses on this property? Do you want a pool? Where in the city do you want this to be located? What community do you want to be a part of? It's a very custom and laser focused process that we are going to help you with kind of every step of the way. But hopefully this video is going to give you a rough overview of some of the factors that you need to consider when looking for a lot. And I think, of course, going back to the first one, number one is budget. So again, this is David Israelson with Bedrock Realty. I hope this helps, and I'll see you on the next video. And please, again, reach out anytime. Here's my number and my email, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. All right, take care. Bye-bye.